Hi, this is Professor Brennan. This is part 3 of Introduction to Argumentation. I'm talking to my argumentation class, and we left off discussing what do you think the traits are of a critical thinker. Let's move right into that PowerPoint. Okay, you guys hear my cat in the background there? All right, here we go. So we're going to look at Bloom's taxonomy is actually a common way to think about critical thinking. And Bloom divided critical thinking into 6 different skills. And the top one actually is like the first part of it, of how you build upon that. And so when you're, first you create combining parts to make a whole. And then you're able to evaluate, judging the value of information or ideas. You analyze, breaking down information into component parts, into little parts, little pieces. Applying the facts, rules, and concepts to that is. So understanding how to apply your understanding of it. Like, how do we see it? This is where you would think of context. In what context is it being said? How do we understand it? Understanding what it means. Right? What it means in that situation. Recognizing and recalling facts, remembering what they are. All of these pieces require different skills. Your ability to remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. So how will you be able to recognize the facts and see them and be able to understand, apply, analyze, and evaluate them and create a new argument? This will be one of your challenges, is to be able to see what you see anew in a different way. I'm going to give you an example. So it reminds me of when I had to do my defense for my master's degree. And one of the things I did is I wrote a paper about visual rhetoric visual argumentation and rhetoric. And I used this particular photograph of I think it was about 5 or 6 men. They were in the backdrop behind them that was kind of, it was a little snowy, wasn't in California. It would have been in like either Wisconsin or Montana, some northern, like northwest or northeastern state. And there was kind of an open field of trees behind them and a fence, and they all were wearing white masks. Now, not hooded masks like KKK, but masks that they had made. A lot of them had the mask and had their cowboy hat on. They were dressed in very like ranching, hunting gear, actually more hunting gear, with guns, holding guns, and they had a flag. One of them was holding an American flag, not a Confederate flag, American flag, and they were holding a dead wolf. And I analyzed this picture, and I don't have this picture to show you right this very second, but I analyzed this picture. And one of the things that at that time I was uncomfortable saying was discussing white supremacy. Like, that picture was really about, there's a big rift between people who are against wolves being present. There's all these arguments that wolves take the hunter's food. They don't have anything to, kill or shoot or to eat because the wolves are eating it all, or the wolves are attacking cattle. And that in a very small percentage is true, in a very small percent. Mostly, no one ever sees a wolf. Wolves are rarely seen, and they don't really have interaction with people. Okay, and they're not even here, they're way up in Northern California, but they're not. There's a whole story about that. But the point is, I was looking at this from the perspective of just a narrow perspective, actually, the narrow perspective of looking at wolf hunting and the attitude toward wolves, and that's what my paper was about. But I also was suggesting that with the white, they chose white. It looked like they had like cut out t-shirts, like they had a t-shirt and they made holes. So they had holes. They have a hole for the eyes and the hole for a mouth. That was it. but they definitely wanted to remain anonymous, but they chose white. They could have chose anything to cover their faces, but they chose that. So for me, they were drawing this relationship between wolves and black people, right? And because white, the white hood reminds us of the KKK, which is about slavery, right? And about racism. And so I saw that, but I didn't create a whole new argument. And that's where I'm going with this is your task is to look at what you have in front of you and to see if you can see more than what's been said about it, right? That's when you'll know that you're really developing your argumentation skills, is when you can really go past that. And now I did, in my defense, it was called out on me and I was able to talk about white supremacy, that was the root of what was going on, and how white supremacy is rooted in this idea that that whites are dominant over everything, including animals. And that goes into, a lot of our beliefs, religious beliefs that are rooted in that dominion over animals, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, the point is, it's a long way of me saying that hopefully you'll be able to develop your own arguments as you look at the data, look at the information, and figure out the deeper meaning of things. Okay. So here's just more of it. Knowledge is remembering, comprehension, application, analysis, evaluation, and finally, creating means synthesis. How do you put it all together? How do you synthesize it to create a new argument? So traits and obstacles. So the traits of a critical thinker. Intellectual humility. What do we mean by that? What is intellectual humility? What is humility? Right? Think about it. What does humility mean? Intellectual humility means you're willing to say, I don't know. You're willing to realize you don't know everything. You're willing to realize you don't have to know everything. Right? The only way you can really begin to know more is when you acknowledge what you don't know. That opens you up to learn more. And we respect people that say, you know what, I don't know. Intellectual courage means putting yourself out there, being willing to look at something. That's what I was being called out in my defense. Was, Barry, are you saying white supremacy? And I was like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's intellectual courage. And this was a few years ago, and willing to call that out and what that meant. Intellectual perseverance. Don't give up on looking. Don't give up in asking the questions. Part of your intellect is to ask questions. Be fair-minded. So realize that what other people have to say might be valuable. Don't be afraid to question them. But be fair-minded and try to give a fair assessment. Try to be balanced. Don't be biased. Obstacles. Confusing labels with reality. People, we do this all the time. We see it all the time. Confusing labels with reality. Remember, labels are what we give to reality. We could be calling people all kinds of things. It's just we make them up. They don't have much to do with reality other than they shape the way we respond to things. But again, we made those labels to begin with. Just think about that. Giving meaning to unrelated events. This is, oftentimes this is fallacious reasoning, is trying to pull in things that are not have anything to do with each other, right? Being able to identify that. Either or thinking. Either or thinking means thinking that there's only two ways to think about something, right? In our current democracy, we only seem to think that there's only two parties. We have a two-party system, but there are other parties. There's a Libertarian Party. There's the Independents. There's the Green Party. there's other parties, I don't even like know their names, maybe Social Democrats. I'm not even sure, but we think of it in terms of Republicans and Democrats as if there's only two ways of thinking about something. There's a plethora of ways to think about things. The same way there are multiple people have multiple identities or multiple ways of seeing themselves. So that's an obstacle if we limit ourselves to only thinking about things in two ways or two options. And being able to look at our unconscious biases and assumptions. What are they? Right? Let's go back to me and use my example. So why didn't I just call out white supremacy at that time? Well, to be honest with you, it's part of my journey. And my journey as a white woman, going through a white gay woman, but I was still a white woman, when talking about just my race, of learning how racism has shaped my identity, how racism has shaped the way I think about things, how even when I attempt to be in every way in my life anti-racist, there I was at that time unwilling to state what might have been obvious to someone else, and really then be willing to look at, well, what was that about? Why didn't I want to say that? Did I think it was too radical? I'm sure that's what I thought. Maybe I was being too radical, or I was unsure. But willing to say, like, looks like, smells like, acts like it's white supremacy. And then what would that mean if I were to look at it that way, right? So that's what it means, is look at our unconscious biases or assumptions. And being able to, that's good critical thinking, is being able to, that can keep us, that can be obstacles or even be walls from our being able to see what's really going on. Okay. Checking our biases. Oh my gosh, we're almost done with this. So we're going to stop here, and I'm going to finish up here in the next video, and we'll be finished with this lecture. We're going to talk about checking our biases in a minute.